All right, welcome back to another episode of the Millennial Sales Podcast. This is your host, Tommy Tahoe Alemo. We're coming at you with episode 176. So I wanted to, talk about this week's guest. Before I do that, I want to give you a little personal update. We're going to start, these episodes with a quick update. Just did week 3 at the new job and just hit the prospecting trail for the first time in a while. First time picking up the phone on the cold call, sending the emails, the LinkedIn, everything like that. I had a little bit of a hiatus between jobs, so it was the first time, using outreach and getting on the phones in a while. So my two takeaways. One, that phone feels really heavy on the first few, but it gets lighter. The more you do it, it gets easier. Once you get in a rhythm, once you're consistent, once you kind of start eating the frog, so to speak. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is what I found super interesting was on day one, I'm starting this cadence and I send an email to the CEO at a really hot startup and, he forwarded me along to the VP of the department we sell to, and we got a meeting booked. And on Friday, I did the same thing. And on Saturday, I got a response that the CEO forwarded my email to the VP of the department, and he said, please take me off your list, add me to the do not contact list. By the way, this is very poor form. So all that to say, you can do the same thing. One person's going to set you up with a meeting. The other person's going to, freak out at you. So who knows? You got to A/B test. You never know how people are going to respond. So you got to take your shot and shoot it. So that's my tip for the day. Without further ado, I want to get into this week's interview. And God, I love this guy. I love Scott Leese. He's one of the most recognized sales leaders in SaaS. You've probably seen him all over LinkedIn or Twitter, but he's a 6-time sales leader. He's a 3-time founder. He is a 2-time author, and he's a sales consultant and a strategic advisor and a mentor to probably dozens of companies and probably hundreds, if not thousands, of salespeople and sales leaders around the world. He's like the superhero of sales. I mean, he's got the experience scaling companies, right? He's led companies, most recently at Qualia, who's off the charts right now. He's really accessible for people. There's a bunch of people like myself that hit him up just on LinkedIn, ask for advice, ask to chat. He's super around. And then he keeps it real 100% of the time. He talks about money. He talks about stress. He talks about, what it's like to be a VP of sales and getting shafted by a CEO and things like that, man. So he talks about the real stuff. And, I met him. I reached out to him for advice earlier this year, just cold. And I really have enjoyed his podcast, Surf and Sales, with our mutual friend, Richard Harris. And we grabbed a call and I offered to help him with a few things pro bono. Just he seemed swamped with what he was doing, and we developed a little bit of a relationship, and he was helping me out. So he's a great guy. And we go really deep in this one. So we cover what it means to be a competitor in sales and, his insane work ethic and competition. And we compare that to, folks like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant and just some of these sports analogies from documentaries we've seen, but it really speaks to what he's like and how he's been successful. Scott, spent the first 3 years after college. Well, he was a semi-pro soccer player and tennis. He's a tennis player and soccer player in college. But then in his early 20s, he suffered about 3 years in the hospital with some rare conditions. He had about close to a dozen life-saving surgeries. So he, from the ages of 24 to 27, when most of us are, getting our wits about us professionally, he was in the hospital and he didn't leave his hospital bed. And so when he came out, when he was 27 and, 80 pounds lighter or whatever it was, he started from the bottom, in sales. And so he talks about what that climb was like when he finally closed the deal late on a Friday night for his first deal when he was way behind the pack. So we talk about that whole journey. talk about his work ethic, his competition, his gratitude, what makes him successful. And then we get, towards the end of the show, talk about money and, how should we let money motivate us or not motivate us as salespeople? And then what the hell should we do with it once we start, making some commission checks? It's something that a lot of people kind of shy away from and don't talk about as much. So we get into all that. So you can find Scott on LinkedIn or Twitter. He's super accessible. He runs a Thursday night sales, which is the world's largest sales happy hour. You could check that out at thursdaynightsales.com. Check out Scott Leese Consulting. Or what I would recommend also is that you can read his book, which is called Addicted to the Process. It's a great book, especially for anyone kicking off their sales career in their first few years. It's like 70, 100 pages. I read it earlier this year. It's an awesome read. It's a quick read. And what I'm going to do here real quick is a giveaway. Let's make this fun. So the first 10 people that I see that post this podcast interview on social, it can be LinkedIn, it could be Twitter, it could be Instagram, it could be Facebook. You post it on social, you tag me and Scott. I'm on Instagram and Twitter. I'm Tommy Tahoe. On LinkedIn, Tom Alemo. Scott Leese is, I think, just Scott Leese on LinkedIn and Twitter. So tag us, post it, and I will personally buy you his book and I will send it to you. And, I'll hit you up on a DM and we can get that thing going. But the first 10 people, there's the step. You post it on social media, you tag us, and then I will DM you if you're one of the first 10 and I'll get you Scott's book. So without further ado, let's get into this. If you did like today's episode, if you got value from Scott, all I'm asking is that if you would please subscribe and leave a review. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, if you're watching here on YouTube, hello, please subscribe, leave a review. Outside of that, let's get into today's conversation with Scott Leese. Let's go. All right, Scott Leese, early in the morning. Good morning, man. How you doing? Welcome to Millennial Sales.
Good morning, Tom. Thanks for having me here. Thanks for getting up early with me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. First and foremost, I gotta say, I'm super excited for this episode. You've been someone that, I was really, have learned a lot from this year. We met earlier this year, just kind of happenstance through LinkedIn, I think, or through the podcast that you do with Richard. And, you make an impact on a lot of sellers, old and young, but especially young people that are trying to figure out their career, like me, like a lot of the listeners. So I want to first and foremost just thank you for everything that you do for the community before we get into this into the episode today.
I appreciate that, Tom. That means a lot. I've got a special affinity for people who are just getting started in their career.
Yeah, and one quick maybe like icebreaker that I don't think a lot of people bring up. You talk about your sports career a little bit from here and there, but tennis. You talk about soccer a lot. You don't talk about tennis. I'm a tennis guy too. So at some point we'll have to duke it out.
That's true. That's true. I don't end up talking about tennis too often for whatever reason. Maybe because it's a little more individualistic sport, overall than the team aspect. But yeah, I'd love to hit some tennis balls with you sometime.
Yeah, and I feel like it has a pretty good, metaphor to sales and to life, just in the fact that it's a one-on-one sport. It's all you out there. You can't pass the blame to anyone else. You can take the success when it comes. There's the ups, the downs. You can come back. All that. There's just all these metaphors that I think really align well.
Super frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Right? Super routine based and rhythmic. Yeah. From your service motion or whatever, and yeah, lots of good metaphors there.
For sure. So yeah, as folks heard on the intro here, you have a really interesting background, both from the sports career that you've had, the physical battles that you fought early on in your career and in your 20s, and then obviously all the success that you've had in the startup world and everything like that. But I want to dive in really to the initial part of your sales career to really understand what it was like, right? Because I know that you started late. You started at 27 or so.
So you had a little bit of a handicap there in terms of the timeline that you started. And it wasn't easy for you to kick it off in sales. And I think a lot of people would look at you and say, well, Scott Leese, he's this athlete and he's super confident and super competitive. And he probably just picked up the phone and closed the first person that he talked to. But you talked in your book that it wasn't that way at all. And you really struggled a lot. So I'd love for you to just elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, struggling is a little bit of an understatement. I mean, I tried to quit after my very first day. I told my wife that there was no way I was going to be able to do sales and it would never work. I got hired in a batch of around 20 people, really large, like hiring class. At the end of the first week, I was the last one left who had either not quit or not made a sale yet. So I was freaking out and, convinced that I was going to get fired, and this is 2004. So 16 years ago or so, it's just like totally different universe. There's not as many resources to tap into. There's no communities to tap into and learn from. I was coming in blind. I'd never done any kind of sales before, never been in business whatsoever. And I didn't get much training at all. I got put on the phones after half a day of training. And the training was really like, here's what our company does. And here's the product and service we provide. And that's it. Off you go. Right. So it was just straight thrown into the middle of the ocean and like figure out how to swim, not an ideal situation whatsoever. And it took me a little bit to find my groove and figure out, what selling kind of style and strategy worked for me. It wasn't easy at all. I was definitely not like, just straight away, day one, doing great on the phones. No.
And the first sale was like a Friday night, like 8 p.m., something like that. Is that right?
Yeah. Like I was saying, I was basically convinced they were going to try to fire me after the first week. Because I hadn't made a sale, I didn't know any better. I don't think that they actually like said that to me or put that kind of pressure on me. This was just like my own paranoid kind of, mentality. And so I'm like, well, I'm just not going to leave. I'm going to stay here, all night basically until there's nobody left here. And, 5 o'clock passed, 6 o'clock passed, 7 o'clock passed. And I started taking advantage of the time zone. We were working in just outside of Walnut Creek, California at the time is where the office was. So I start calling Hawaii, because I'm taking advantage of the time zone. And it's like 9:30 at night. I think I had like already ordered pizza and I might have even grabbed like a couple beers. And I got a hold of somebody, 9:30 California time or so. And real fast sales cycle at the time that I was in. I one call closed this guy, and there's like the lights are off in the building. There's nobody there. Yeah. I just have this like mini celebration with myself, and I'm like, oh fuck, that was amazing. That felt good, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I can do this, And the light bulb kind of clicked, and that big light bulb for me was just, well, I just outworked everybody. Right? Like I'm 27 years old. It's Friday night. It's 9:30 and I'm in the office cold calling. Like other people are not willing to do that. So that's how I'm going to win. That's how I'm going to compete. Like that's going to be my advantage because I don't have the training. I don't have the skill set or the experience. That was like my big epiphany. And so I rode that like, well, I'm just going to outwork Tom and that way I can beat him. I rode that for quite a while until I like actually developed some skills.
That's all. I mean, everyone can remember their first deal and it's just it is like a light bulb switches and it's like, oh shit, that was awesome. I can do this. Yeah. And like you mentioned some of the paranoia and obviously like now it's like, hey, I'm just going to outwork Tom. I'm going to outwork everyone. That's how I'm going to succeed. Has that gone away as you've had success and gained skills? Because to me, on the outside of someone that I haven't worked with you, but I know you decently well, and I see you doing all these different things, and I know that you do work really hard. But I'm curious if you think that ties into it of like, no, that's just the Scott Leese life strategy at this point. Like I'm just going to outwork everyone, and that's how I'm going to get what I need to get.
You know, I think I think for the most part, I'm still that way. You know, I could go back even farther. Like I grew up in Chico, California. You know, went to the same high school as Aaron Rodgers, quarterback of the Packers. And I remember a few years ago, he said something to the effect of like he got a huge chip on his shoulder because people didn't go north of Sacramento to recruit, which is why he ended up going to junior college first before he went to Cal. And I can remember, you know, playing tennis and soccer up there and doing really well, and you know, a decent number of accolades, and like, you know, where's all my offers? Like the local college like didn't even reach out to me, and I'm like, what the fuck? You got to be kidding me! I got like these offers to go to Santa Barbara and, you know, down south and Pepperdine area and things like that. But I wasn't never the like most gifted athlete. Like I have athletic ability, but I won in tennis by outworking people. I won in soccer because I was just like not gonna quit, and I was gonna, you know, do whatever it kind of took. And so I think I just always had this like little bit of an underdog kind of scrappy mentality, little bit of chip on my shoulder, you know, even to the point of kind of inventing slights. You know, like, you know, the story about Michael Jordan where he's like invents things that people like wronged him in some way about.
Yeah.
Like I think I have a little bit of that, and I've had it since I was a kid, you know. And I keep hustling like that because I know what it's like to have everything ripped away, you know, in a flash. And that goes back to my health troubles and stuff. And so there's a part of me that's just like, dude, if you stop right now, like it's all going to get taken away, right? Somebody's going to pass you, or, you know, whatever. And I have this like little bit of low burning anxiety all the time. Like all this is going to go away. Like it doesn't matter. I can make $100,000 this month. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, fuck me, I might make nothing next month. Right. And I'm not, this is by no means me endorsing this kind of mentality. It's just like,
yeah, that's how you are.
Yeah. Part of my makeup. And you know, it serves me well in the sense that I'm never struggling to find motivation. You know, everything around me motivates me. And you know, so that's a little bit of into the psyche of my brain, I guess.
Yeah. Did you, that's funny that you talked about the kind of like making up slights. I remember even back in high school, there was some kid that got put in the newspaper for tennis he was just way better than me, but I didn't think he was. So I cut out his picture and I put it on the fridge of my house, and my mom was like, "You're crazy." But anyways, like, did you do that type of stuff? I mean, maybe not like, you know, put pictures of your colleagues on your fridge, but like, did you, when you were on the come up, or even now, like, did you list people out and you're like, hey, like every single week, you know, Johnny's the top salesperson, and I'm like, I'm going to make sure I make 10 more calls, or I'm going to show up, make sure that it's at this time and leave at this time? Or like, was that stuff that you would just continuously do, and then that was kind of snowball into you know, the success you had?
100%, man. 100%. To the extreme of, this is how competitive I am, and I guess I was back then when I was first getting started. Like, I made a point to be the first one in the office and the last one to leave. And I know how, you know, cliched that kind of sounds, and not everybody can do that. But at the time, I was 27 years old. I had no kids. My wife was deep in grad school and spending tons of time, you know, studying and everything. So I had the time and ability to do that. But I made a point to be the first guy in the office and the last guy to leave. You know why? Because I wanted everybody else to be demoralized. I wanted Tom to be like, Jesus Christ, like no matter how early I try to get there, this dude Scott is like already there, right? And I can remember showing up one time at like 7 a.m. and somebody beat me, and I was like, well, fuck that. That ain't happening again. So, you know, the next day I showed up at like 6. So I started working like 6 a.m. to, you know, after 6 p.m. basically every single day. And I wouldn't leave. Like if you were in the office still working, I was like, God damn it, dude, Tom, like, when are you going to go home, dude? Right. And I've since, like, there's a famous story about Kobe Bryant. I can't remember. It's like somebody came to LA and was warming up. Right. And they went into the gym and like Kobe was already there. And this basketball player like did like an hour and a half workout or something like that. And that basketball player was like, Kobe was there before me and he was there after I left. And like after the game, the player asked Kobe, like, dude, like, is that your normal routine or whatever? And Kobe said to him, no, I just wasn't going to leave until you were gone. Right. And I had that same kind of mindset with the sales floor, which is just like crazy competitive and stupid to look back on, but that's the type of shit that I was thinking about, man. You know, I wasn't there to make friends, you know. I was there to get good, do well, get paid, and kind of, you know, move on, right?
Was anyone ever telling you to like, hey Scott, like time to chill out, like, or as you got into leadership or anything like that, like was anyone at any point ever like trying to slow you down intentionally?
No, not really. I mean, certainly not from any leadership at the company. You know, there was no, like, I did not feel like they cared at all about my, you know, health or well-being. They were like, I think they loved it. They were like, this guy's a machine. I'm just gonna keep adding fuel, you know, to him. Now, yes, all the time. Like Richard Harris, my surf and sales partner and good friend, like, dude, he texts me all the time to calm down. You know, he's like, you need a vacation, or you need to take some time off and whatnot. And you know, my family for sure tells me that. So I actually kind of need that, you know, because I won't notice, right, like how much I'm doing or how hard I'm working, and I don't feel like overwhelmed, right?
You have a high tolerance for that.
Yeah, but you know, there's some guardrails in my life where people like Richard are like, hey dude, you sure you want to have 13 hours of podcast tomorrow? Is that a good idea? I'm like, really? No, is that what we booked? Shit, okay, that sounds like a lot. So
but yeah, I find that a lot of times it's that thing that can make us successful. It can also be the same thing that can draw us back. So it's good to have people that maybe can help to balance it. And he says, you know, for what it's worth, that you do the opposite, that you're like, hey, you're pushing him to kind of get out of his comfort zone from time to time. And so I think it's helpful to have a, you know, a buddy that can push you in the right direction in both of those ways.
A good yin and yang dynamic there between us.
Yeah. So since we're talking about him and talking about a little bit of that, you know, one of the big focuses that you have is around micro communities. And I think anyone that's been in sales or the business world for the past few years knows, maybe not this year, but you know, past few years, like there's all these major conferences. You got Dreamforce, you got this, that, you know, 100,000 people. You know, in San Francisco, there's like, you know, you can't get anywhere because there's a new conference every single week that all these people are flooding into. And you shake all these hands and you take all these business cards, and then you don't remember anyone, or you don't remember the speakers. So I know a big thing that you're focused on with surf and sales, with Thursday night sales, with a lot of the things that you do with your Patreon is really focused on building a micro community. So I'd love to hear you talk about what the genesis of that was and what that's meant for you, and maybe some of the relationships you formed.
Yeah. This goes back to like late 2017. So, you know, we're talking about 3 years ago, let's call it, right? And I was having an aversion to everything has to be bigger, 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 and just this like massive scale in terms of interactions with people. And I was actually in Costa Rica on a family vacation with Richard's family over Thanksgiving, and we were talking about, you know, conferences and like his schedule, because, you know, he's like a road warrior. Like he's going to you know, every conference, and from Billings, Montana to Charleston, West Virginia to wherever, right? And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you know, this like doesn't sound fun to me. Like there's no way you're building like deep relationships and learning shit. And like, I ain't going to, you know, the Marriott in St. Louis for another conference. Like, how come nobody has conferences in like a cool place that people actually would want to go to? And why does there have to be 10, 20, 100,000 people? Like, if I spend time over the course of a few days with like 15, 20 people, those relationships can become very, very meaningful and last like forever, really, you know? And so he was like, well, why don't you build a conference then, Scott? I'm like, well, who the fuck am I? Like, I can't make a conference. Like, why don't you help me? You know, we'll be kind of better together, right? He's like, all right, well, you know, you get it started and I'll participate, whatever. I think he thought I was kind of joking, but one of the things about me is that when I get an idea, like I take action like real quick if I like it. And I talk about this all the time, like shrinking the delta between idea and action. And so before we knew it, you know, Surf and Sales was kind of born, right? And the whole point was to have this experiential kind of learning environment and deep relationship building, get away from your normal routine, right? So going to Costa Rica, Mexico, Nicaragua. So we take like 15 to 20 people a couple times a year, and kind of combine a vacation and, you know, surfing, which is something I'm passionate about, with, you know, sales and leadership training. And we've had everybody from SDRs to CEOs of tech companies come along. And we have, you know, 6 hours or so of like training during the day and different sessions hosted by different people. And so I've just like, I've been really about like a smaller, more intimate kind of relationship building and learning for a number of years now. And that has kind of been with me. And then when all this pandemic stuff started, you know, Justin Welsh reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to do like a sales happy hour for some people? Real, just like casual, one-off kind of idea. I'm like, yeah, all right, that'd be cool. You know, just give people a little relief or whatever. And we had like 50, 60 people show up, and we're like, holy shit, you know, that's like, that was kind of cool. And then he had a conflict the next week. And I thought to myself, you know, if I don't do this again, this is going to die, right? This goes back to that like paranoid mindset of mine where I like,
it probably would have.
It probably would have, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, well, I gotta do this again somehow, or this is gonna die. And so I reached out to my friend Amy Volas, and I'm like, hey, you wanna join me? And she said yes. And then, you know, it grew. I don't remember exactly how many people, but like, you know, there was maybe like 100 people the next time. And then Justin came back, and it was the three of us for a long time. So that's how Thursday Night Sales got started. And it's, you know, now we're going on almost 30 weeks in a row. Every single Thursday from, you know, 7 Central to sometimes it's gone like past midnight, right?
Wow.
And it's just like virtual happy hour and AMA, ask me anything kind of thing, where people from all over the world at different stages in their career and different roles are able to ask, you know, me and Amy now, you know, whatever questions that you want. It's like, there's so many deep relationships that have spawned off of this now. And I just don't see those kind of things happening at the Dreamforces and the, you know, SaaSter conferences of the world and stuff like that, you know? And so I've become a big proponent of these micro communities. And, you know, Revenue Collective is a good one. Sales Hacker Community is a good one. Rev Genius is one that's kind of just getting started. And so I keep trying to, be a part of these and build these, and they're kind of all the rage right now.
Yeah. What's a and I've been on I haven't been to servant sales, but I have been to a handful of the Thursday night sales, which are great. What is there? I know so many questions get asked, and the conversations really do vary wildly. But are there any questions or themes that you think come up a lot more recently, or anything that sticks out to you that has been really a hot button the last few weeks, or something that has really stuck out to you of someone that was looking for advice on a certain aspect?
Well, probably a bit obvious in hindsight, but because so many people lost their jobs, I'd say the central theme has been, career advice, right? Anything from, where do I find my next job, to what's the best way to interview or prepare, right? So how do I, move from SDR to AE, or AE to manager, or manager to VP, all this kind of stuff. So that the job component, the recruiting component, that's been the most central theme, I think, over the 6+ months, or however long it's been now. We've been doing this.
Yeah. I mean, I just started a new job this week, so I've been on the interviewing trail the last few months, and there was definitely things that you and Justin and Amy had brought up that were helpful throughout that process. So that makes sense. I want to pivot a little bit. You talked 15 minutes ago about some of the motivation early in the careers, like, hey, I want to make sales, I want to be successful, I want to get paid. And what's super interesting to me is that sales is one of the only professions that you can really control your destiny in terms of success, in terms of financial success in particular, and no one really talks about it. I don't hear a lot of heads of sales or sales trainers or consultants or CEOs or anyone talk about money, and I don't, at least I don't see it very often. And so you're one of the people that does, and I'd love to hear what your take is on maybe a young person that, one, is probably a little money hungry because we don't have much to start off our career, graduate college or whatever, and you're starting from scratch, and then once you start hitting success, like I think the first part is like, how do you use money to help drive your motivation, and the second is like, well, what do you do with that? Like, you can get really successful in your late 20s, early 30s, and start making a lot of money, and then like, how do I not blow it all on stupid shit? Like, what do I do with it?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know why people treat money and compensation and earnings as such like a taboo kind of subject. Maybe it's just like an aversion. I think like the 80s maybe was like so pomp and circumstance and flash and like, look at all this money I made. And like, maybe the pendulum has shifted around so much that people don't want to talk about these things. And, certainly everyone is like customer focused right now, and, servant leadership and all that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with those kind of things. But you know what else there's nothing wrong with? Making fucking money. Okay. And being motivated by money and having specific targets for yourself year after year that grow. And I just don't know why. I just don't have the belief that it's like bad to talk about. I talk about it all the time. I can remember, getting my first sales job in the Bay Area, and my base salary was 30 grand, right? You imagine trying to live off 30 grand in the Bay Area. It's almost impossible, right? And so I can remember then getting a commission check, and it's like, oh my gosh, I made, $5,000 this month. And that was the most money I had ever made in a single month, right? And then I'm like, okay, I wonder if I could do that again. Oh, I wonder if I could hit 7.5. Oh my God, I just made 10. Holy crap. I never thought I'd make that much money. I made 10 grand in a month. I wonder if I could do that again. And then I just kept setting these like little, bars for myself, keep kind of raising it. And I'm like, excuse me, every time you hit it, it's like a little bit surprising. Like, holy crap, how did that happen? Was that a one hit wonder? Am I going to be able to maintain that and do it again? And just keep going with it, right? The flip side of that is I watched a lot of people, buy a BMW they could barely afford, right? One of my good friends, who I won't mention, but he bought this like big, huge, fancy Denali, and just like extended himself. And I just I've never been that guy, right? Like, I don't care about fancy stuff like that, I don't have a bunch of fancy clothes. I dress like I did in high school. I look like a homeless person half the time. I drive like an old Prius. Like, I'm just not that. And I see some of these people who I know I'm making more money than by far, and they're driving like an $80,000 car that I know they're making huge payments on, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, the image doesn't matter. What matters is what you're actually earning and how you're using it. And using it in that regard to like look fancy or whatever is just stupid to me, right? And so I've, at a very early age, my wife and I started buying some investment properties, right? And then we started saving for, down payment on these things, or saving up for trips, right? And things like that, like experiences instead of things. And I, saved up and started diversifying, income streams, right? So like we just talked about surf and sales, for example. Well, the first time that we decided to do that, I had to plunk down $25,000 on my credit card, to make all these things happen, right? Like, well, if I didn't have those cash reserves, I might not have been able to do that, or it might have been a little scarier for me, right? But because I tend to be like pretty conservative and save really well, it allows me to take some risks, right? Like, I've de-risked it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
The same thing goes with buying a house. Like, I could have afforded $1 million house in San Francisco 10 years ago. I just thought it was dumb. Like, why am I gonna buy $1 million house in Santa Rosa, where I was living at the time? It's just one of the reasons I moved to Austin. It's like significantly cheaper, right? So rather than 30% or more of my monthly income going to my mortgage, it's like 3% for me right now, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of freedom that you have to start doing things, right? And the same de-risk kind of strategy with money I did before I went off fully on my own. Like, here's my income over here on this side from working at Main Street Hub and Qualia and Outbound Engine and these other companies I've been at. When I started doing all these side hustles, right? It's like I got my advisory stuff, I wrote the book, I got surf and sales. And all of a sudden, my income from all my side hustles matched my income from my main gig. And at that point, I was like, okay, I don't think I need to do this main gig anymore. And I have money saved, and I'm making all this good money, with my side hustles. Let me just go all in on that full time. And if I fail, I'm okay, right? And so it's just, but I don't think people talk about it, enough. And tell like cautionary tales, or like give good advice, financial advice and whatnot. So it's something that I hope to be a part of the dialogue that changes that and sheds a little bit more light on this kind of subject.
For sure. And you mentioned some of the advisory stuff that you were doing kind of on the side, and trying to build that up over time. Could you speak a little bit to the early days of that? Like, how did you go from whatever position you were, VP of sales, director of sales, to like start in that foray? And I'm sure you weren't making a lot on the side, but how did you get that first deal or first contract, first gig, and then obviously you grew it up to the point where you could do that as your full-time gig.
Yeah. This is an interesting topic because everybody wants and knows, I think, that they need to or should have side hustles, right now.
Yeah.
And being a consultant or advisor or whatever seems to be maybe the most obvious route or path. Here's the problem though, is like, you're not really qualified to be an advisor if you have 2 years of sales experience.
Yeah.
So you can't really cut the line too well with that. Like, I had already been a VP 3 times before I ever got my first advisory consulting gig, right? So I had almost 6 years of experience building sales orgs at the VP level before I took on my first client. And what happened actually was I was in between jobs. And so I had left this VP gig. And so I was interviewing for new VP gigs. And some of the companies that I was interviewing with, I didn't really want to go work there full time for whatever reason, right? Like maybe I didn't like the product enough, wasn't passionate enough about it, or the location was wrong, or whatever. And so I started spinning these interviews into consulting gigs. So I'd be like, look, Tom, appreciate the interest. Like, I don't think it's the right fit for me full time. I got an idea for you if you're open to it. Why don't I kind of help you on the side here for a month or 2 or 3 or whatever, while you keep searching for a VP, and I can just act as a bit of a bridge and, give you advice and kind of guide you and steer you in the right direction. That's how I started getting my first gigs, is I spun the interviews into consulting gigs. And, I charged nothing at the time, looking back.
Like,
but
I could nothing, or like just a small amount?
No, like a very small amount, like I think $500 was like the first fee that I charged. And I remember thinking, holy shit, somebody's going to pay me $500 to like get my advice or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Being kind of blown away and like partially feeling guilty and like, am I actually worth that amount of money? And I had a friend who said to me, Jesus, you're undervaluing yourself. Like, when are you going to wake up and realize that you actually, are an expert at building this stuff? And I'm like, and I'm an expert at this. It's taken me even now. It's like, it takes me a long time. And I think it takes a lot of people a long time to get confident enough to be like, yeah, I actually am an authority on XYZ topic. Right. And so I undercharged like for a very long time, and I had somebody a couple weeks ago tell me that I'm undercharging even now, still today. I also had somebody tell me that my prices were insanely high on the same day. So what do you know? But what I wanted to do in the early days was like, I was blown away that somebody would pay me for this. And I just wanted to take people on. So I sort of purposely kept my fees like really, really cheap like that. I wanted to figure out a rhythm and how to do the work and like do well and get some kind of referrals and references kind of going and whatnot. And, I just slowly started increasing my rate, but every time I increased my rate, I was like, deep breath, is anybody going to say yes? Right. So that's kind of how it got started. So
yeah. And now there's no looking back, huh?
Well, I don't know. This goes back to my fear that I was talking about at the beginning of the show. So I don't know, man. People have been asking me, you gonna grow your business, whatever. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, all this shit might disappear tomorrow. Like, I have no idea. Yeah. I might have to go get a VP of sales gig again. I've had this is my 12th month fully on my own right now, and I've had a really good year, and blown away what my expectations were. But how do I know I can do it again next year? I don't know. Like, am I vanilla ice? You know what I mean? Like, am I a one-hit wonder? I have this conversation with people all the time. I've talked to like John Barrows and Richard and other folks who have been in this kind of training or consulting game, a long time. And, I'm sure they've had ups and downs, as well. And, so I'm not going out there even now, like spending lavishly, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I can go buy like, some $5 million house and new cars and all this kind of stuff. Like I'm still sort of hoarding everything because I'm like,
Yeah.
is this going to last? Is this real? Right?
Yeah.
Am I going to turn into a pumpkin at midnight or whatever? So.
But I think that's, I mean, maybe some people would view that as a bit extreme, but I think that's smart. And that's the way that you stay hungry, right? It's not getting complacent, and that keeps you going to the next year and the next year and the next year and the next goal. And you got a lot of time ahead of you to do more interesting and impressive things.
I think the part that's nice is that you start to be able to be really selective in how you spend your time, and that's part of the freedom that you get, that comes after you've earned a certain amount of money, or you're, commanding a certain, fee from clients and whatnot. It's like, I don't have to work with you. You know what I mean? Like if I talk to you, Tom, and you're looking for help, and I don't really get a good vibe from you or love your product or idea, it's very easy for me to say no, right? And if I was going to go back and work full time as an operator, I can be very selective. Like I'm not in a position where I have to say yes to the first or second thing that comes along. I can work with the people I want to work with on projects that sound interesting to me, right? And I think, and I'm hoping that leads to better work, more interesting work, and helps keep me motivated and keep me going.
Yeah. Now I want to ask one more question here, specific to kind of taking you back to the VP or SVP of sales days. So I'm curious, I'm starting a new job this week. There's a lot of folks that are on the job hunt, or maybe they just started a new job. They're listening to you. They're ready to run through a wall. They're ready to make some cold calls, whatever their job is today. Like, what is your advice as someone that's run, half a dozen different sales orgs, full time, and however many consulting, for someone that's like a hungry young rep that wants to make a good impression on you and wants to climb throughout the company and maybe wants to get into management and start working up the chain? Like, what would your advice be to that person if they were on your team?
Well, you just got to get really good at your job first. What I don't like to see or feel is somebody who's a climber, who comes in and just like, yeah, I'm really focused on, getting promoted to this role. And I really want to be, a VP. I want your job one day. Like, okay, that's great. But, you've been here like 2 hours. Like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit, So I think really just becoming a master at your current role, right, is the best way to make a good impression. All the other stuff should be secondary, right? Like, building a good relationship with your boss, or learning additional skill sets. Like, maybe you're doing a lot of reading on leadership or or things like that, or learning, Salesforce admin kind of stuff because you're interested in like the operational side of things, and you're doing that on the side. Like, just don't do those things until you're already pretty damn good at the role that you're in. Then it becomes interesting for me to have conversations with Tom, right? It's like, if Tom is one of my top salespeople and, Tom starts asking me to lunch, or like, in our one-on-ones, like starts changing the conversation a little bit. And it's like, hey, I'm interested in advancement, and this is kind of what I'm thinking. Like, what advice do you have for me? Now I'm bought in, right? Because like, now I believe that Tom has that ability, and now I want to nurture that, right? And now I want to take Tom under my wing and like, okay, he's my, apprentice or whatever, right? I'm gonna help this guy. I'm gonna help this guy, have my job one day now, right? Mm-hmm. But when you come in and you're too focused on those things before you've gotten any good at your current role, it really like misses the mark, right?
Yeah.
And I think so many people now, regardless of their age, just like so many people now don't want to be in whatever role they're in for more than 5 seconds. It's like everybody's focused on whatever the next thing is, that people don't spend enough time getting really good at whatever role they're in right now.
Right. And that's really the only way to move up, is to be the best. The first things first, that's like table stakes. You have to be the best at what you're doing, and then you have to do all the other stuff that would, make you an interesting candidate for the promotion or whatever it might be.
You say table stakes, Tom, and it should be, but I promise you that you and I could, bounce around on LinkedIn or wherever and ask people this same kind of question, and there'd be a lot of answers that would be different than the ones you and I, have given. People jump kind of right there. So, I try to be very cautionary when I give that kind of advice, right?
So I want to take you really quickly before we do a little info on where folks can connect with you and find you and all that. I want to take you quickly to what I call the selfish section, where I ask one question specifically for me because I'm interested in it.
I like that.
So I'm always looking for great guests for the podcast, and there's a lot of folks that are in the, maybe you probably hate this word, in the influencer camp like you, that, we've mentioned a few of their names today. I want someone in the Scott Leese network that is just an amazing sales leader that not enough people know about, or that more people should know about.
I'll give you a name, and it's somewhat selfish of me as well, because he used to work for me, and he's still at Qualia right now. His name's Ryan Heafy, and this is a kid who worked with me when I was at Outbound Engine, and frankly was like very mediocre as a sales rep, and not that great. Certainly no kind of leadership stuff in my mind in terms of how I looked at him or whatever. And after I had left Outbound Engine and started at Qualia, I can't exactly remember, but like we kind of reconnected, and I'm like, okay, dude, I'll bring you over to Qualia and give this another go, right? This is the guy who didn't impress me very much at the first place. I bring him into Qualia, and like, kid does like a 180, right? And like, I don't know if his maturity or whatnot just got to a different level of dedication and seriousness, and performed really, really well as an AE. I moved him up to sales manager, did really well as a sales manager, moved him up to senior sales manager. Year 3, I moved him up to director of sales, and he's like managing, some of the other managers over there. And he's still over there right now. And he's shy, in some ways. Like, he doesn't use LinkedIn all that much yet, which I give him shit for all the time. He's not, I don't know that he's ever been on a podcast. I haven't gotten him to come onto my podcast even. So this is me like shoving him a little bit into the spotlight, because he's somebody I think who's going to make a good VP of sales one day.
Awesome. Ryan, we're coming for you. That's awesome, man. Well, I know that you say you don't love to do self-promotion, so I'm going to do a little promotion for you. First of all, anyone that's listening to this, go buy Scott Leese's book, Addicted to the Process. I read it earlier this year. It's pretty short. It's 100 pages, maybe less. And it's a great read for anyone starting off their sales career. When people that are BDRs hit me up, and sometimes they ask me for reading material or stuff like that, that's always one of the first books that I mention. So check out the book. Hit up Scott on LinkedIn. You can't add him because he's got too many connections, but you could follow him, I guess, and read his posts and connect with him there. Thursday Night Sales is a great way to get introduced to the sales. A lot of it is like SaaS technology community, can meet some great people that way. He's got a podcast, Surf and Sales Podcast, that he does with Richard Harris. He's on Twitter. What did I miss? Patreon. You can get some exclusive content from him. It's $10. It's half of a San Francisco lunch a month, and you get all the different private access to Scott's community. So, truthfully, I don't BS people on the show. Scott is hands down one of the top people in sales to follow, whether you're a practitioner or a leader. So whatever avenue makes sense for you that I just listed, check him out. Scott, anything else that I missed that you're up to that the people should know about?
Man, I gotta hire you as my PR guy. Man.
Your hype man.
Yeah, hype man. I'll give a little sneak preview. My second book comes out.
Ooh.
Fingers crossed. Comes out in December, right before the Christmas rush, and it's all about the trials and tribulations in the life of a VP of sales, how to become one, what you need to do when you are one, and some advice for leaders and founders and how to interact with VPs and kind of change the dynamic of this 15 to 18 month average tenure. So keep your eyes open for this book towards the end of the year about the life of a VP of sales.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Scott. Thanks for coming on the show this morning. Everyone check out everything that Scott puts out there. And thanks again for joining.
Appreciate it, Tom. Thanks, man.